Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the launch of our State in Africa report. My name is Nathaniel Witbooi. I am the... Sorry, Ndaleka? You're fine. So I am the marketing lead and ecosystem lead in Africa Arena. Thank you so much, Christophe. And then on this panel today, we're going to be discussing our Tech in Africa report. To my right, we have Christopher Viarnaud and Crosby Hunda, who will be joining us. So let's get straight into it. So first of all, when we take a look at 2021 was an incredible year. So the first thing I would like to do, just to get your attention, could I just ask everybody to just stand up, just for 1 second? 1 second, 1 second. Everybody in the room, stand up. I'm not asking for Slim Shady, I'm asking for everybody in the room. Okay, so I want you to do one extremely very important thing. Could you please just give yourself a hand of applause? A loud one, guys. You need to be proud. You need to be extremely proud.
So, Nathaniel, maybe as an introduction,
sorry, I was struggling.
Go back one slide. So we're very happy to announce today that we are launching our annual State of Tech in Africa report. I don't know, who has read this report before? Okay, a number of you. So the State of Tech in Africa report is our contribution in terms of research to what's going on in the ecosystem. So it's the third year we're doing this. The objective of this report is really to tell the story behind the numbers. It's a 58-page report, and it includes some analytics, but more importantly, it includes elements on the stories behind the numbers. So we've just uploaded this report on the Africana Wired website. You can download it for free on this URL. So you just go on the Africana website, click Wired, Insights section, and you'll be able to download this report free of charge. The new thing in this report this year is that we've bundled and embedded in the report, which is quite new, a number of the interviews, podcasts, so you have and pitches and panels and keynotes that we've done throughout the event throughout the year. So you can hear Zach just right from the report. You can, there's a video embed, you can click on it, and you can hear Zach talking for 10, 15 minutes about it. Then you can hear pitch from a startup from Kenya, Zuri Health, panel discussion on Startup Act, and many, many other elements. This is a way to tell the story behind the numbers, which is really what this report does. It's not another report with more numbers and analytics. It's a report that sort of gives you an overall view of what's going on in the ecosystem. And I think everybody can see it now. So we'll start with Nathaniel, who's one of the authors of the report. I think it's his first year contributing to this report. Well done. To maybe tell us about the analytics and the data and what has happened in 2021. And Nathaniel, tell us about the key insights. And we have a lot of stuff from the big deal that is in this report. For those who don't know the big deal, it's a couple of guys, Max and Maxims, who are publishing every week great insights on the ecosystem. You can subscribe to their newsletter. It's like one graph, one paragraph. It's super useful. Nathaniel.
Perfect. So you're probably wondering why I asked you to stand up just before, because I'm grateful you guys stood for so long. It makes me really happy. It shows me that you have pride. The reason why I wanted you guys to give yourself a hand of applause, because without every single one of you in this room creating deal flow, the startup hustlers, the VCs, the ecosystem partners, we would not be able to reach the record-breaking 2021 year where we reached 4.3 billion rand, or $1 billion in revenue or funding within the African continent. So can we just give ourselves like a hand of applause for that, because you worked really hard for that. Oof, I'm struggling to navigate this remote. I'm trying to go back. Apologies, Christophe.
You're there. Let me handle it.
Thank you.
Just talk.
There we go. So based on that 4.3, if we can just move on one more slide, because there should be information that I want to touch on. Oh, it's not there. So I'm missing some information, but that's okay. We kind of did a comparison between all of the reports that were out there. Our main contributor was the big deal, but sometimes you wonder, like when you're reading Partech, when you're reading Brighter Bridges, if you're reading Disrupt Africa, each and every single one of these legs have a different metrics of how they evaluate and take a look at funding and how they look at startups from the African continent. So the first part is like Brighter Bridges. They kind of take a look at traction, customers, IP, and management teams, like how their teams perform. Partech takes a look at equity deals in tech, digital spaces, funding rounds higher than $200,000. It defines an African startup as companies who are on the African continent, so it excludes people or founders who are off the African continent. And then it also takes a look at metrics in terms of operations or revenue in Africa, and then also excludes like startups that don't have, like I said earlier, headquarters in Africa. Where the big deal takes a look at an opposite view, where it tracks funding rounds from $100,000 and up. It includes startups who have headquarters in the African continent, but it also includes founders and partners who are not situated here. They have a startup in Africa, and it includes founders from Africa or startups on other geographical locations, but as long as there's an African founder on it, they would include that into the report in the data. Disrupt Africa takes a whole different approach where they provide deep dives into investment trends with startups, geographies, and verticals, and as well as data. Apologies. Data of startup acquisition. So it's more like M&A and private equity acquisitions. If we move on to the next slide, so we can see that most. These slides are so wrong. That's fine. So when we take a look at the most top investors in Africa, there we go. For some reason they're not translating properly. But besides that, let's continue. So when we take a look at the biggest investors in Africa at the moment, when it comes to local investors, we have 5 incredible people who've been doing incredible works to work towards this $4.3 billion. The first being Launch Africa, as you can see, Black Found Fund, Loftic. I mean, if you take a look at what they've done this year, like Launch Africa has done 67 deals in 13 countries up until that point. So can we give it like...
That's more than a deal a week.
That's one deal a week.
That's crazy.
I mean, I can't even believe that. But I mean, I can understand why everyone's been working so hard. And then if you take a look at, if you can just go back to my slide. We'll get back to that for you early stage startups who are going to be doing some, debt funding. It's become a very big trend. But if we move on to one more slide, just one more thing. Is it me or are these slides not aggregating properly? But let me move on. So I'll get back to the investment side. The first thing I want to take a look at is something very emerging, which is debt funding. So debt funding has become a very, very, very big acquisition. Just would like to grab that remote again because I think we're having troubles trying to navigate. And I just want to, I'm trying to figure out why is it not navigating properly. There we go, that's better. Okay, so debt funding emerged as a new asset class for funding. So a total of 7% of funds last year were raised over Africa in the past 10 years. So 2021 saw 37 startups raise close to $767 million in over 43 debt rounds. Yes, this debt is on fire. I agree 100%. So debt financing can be both good and bad. I mean, if we take a look at both antitheses, it's quite interesting. So if a company can use debt to stimulate growth, it can be positive. So what are the indicators of trying to see, like, what is the stimulation of growth? So lenders not having claim to future profit, debt obligation and predictability can be planned. Debt financing offers a flexible solution. So in other words, you know exactly what debt is coming. You know exactly what you need to pay off in the next 3 to 5 or whatever term sheet you create with your lender. And then interest in tax deductibles and doesn't dilute owners' portion of ownership. So as a startup, when you have debt, you still have that full ownership of what you're trying to achieve and have that stake of really pushing forward your dream. But the risk of debt financing, which could be problematic, is that assets that could be seized in the cause of default, so you have a lot more to lose if you do not generate traction or generate revenue. Owners may be required to personally guarantee that the debt is high, or higher debt equity ratios increase the financial risk of the company. Some debt investments restrict businesses from pursuing alternative financing options and can be difficult to qualify for depending financial statuses and credit scores. So it's a tricky thing, because if you go into it and you fail, it's very hard to recover afterwards. So after some debt financing, I just really want to go back to that incredible slide where we were speaking about these startups. Like, with the local ecosystem, it's been very interesting taking a look at things like individuals like Zach from Launch Africa, with the deals that have been raised. Just turn under, there we go. So deal sizes last year, when we take a look at local venture capitalists who have been investing in startups, they've ranged between $100,000 and $1 million on the continent so far this year, and they've invested in about 97 out of 295 deals that took place on the continent, and they've already invested in 127 deals in 2021. So in other words, if you take a look at it, break it down into the top four, you see in Nigeria they've collectively made 41 deals. Egypt, they've collectively made 30 deals. Kenya, 15 deals. South Africa, 15 deals. And this led to something even bigger, because in 2021, Africa has seen the highest ratio of mega deals. Like, it was a record round. There's a couple of startups that did deals over $100 million. So in other words, between all the reports, there were about 12 to 14 mega deals that took place last year, including OPay, Zeps, Adele, Wave, just to name a few. And then 2022 has already seeded 2 mega deals of $100 million. So that was raised by Tunisian Series B startup, which is InstaDeep, and then Africa's most valuable unicorn, Flutterwave, raised $250 million in a Series D round. So moving on to more data, something very interesting when we take a look at foreign investment. I just want to get open that slide. I think my fingers are a little bit too big for this remote. It's a real problem, guys. It's like having fat fingers. Like I said, 2021 was a record-breaking funding year. The numbers of deals almost doubled in comparison to 2020. So that, according to the Partech report, that's about a 90% growth year on year. I mean, that's incredible. And then that puts Africa Tech as one of the fastest growing ecosystems globally. I mean, over the past 6 years, it outstriped the past 6 years with a CGAR growth of about 45%, and that is ridiculous. So it's really the traction for the next couple of years, which Christophe is going to touch on in a bit later, is going to be incredible with these predictions. So in other words, deals in Africa above $100,000 are still being dominated by investors who are not headquartered in Africa. So in other words, almost 70% of all deals are going to foreign direct investment, which I'll be calling FDI, given that the appropriate host country policies has basic level of development. So what that means is that they've got policies in place, they have structures in place, but what does that mean for foreign direct investment? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it going to help us? Is it really going to motivate and really cultivate what's happening in Africa? So FDI triggers technology spillovers, which assists human capital for formation, contributes to international trade integration, helps create a more competitive business environment, and enhances enterprise development. So all of these contribute to higher economic growth, which is the most potent tool for alleviating poverty within developing countries. So that leads to cleaner technologies, it leads to better policies, corporate policies being created within the African continent, because there is investment, there is mentorship, there is growth. Because if you take a look at the reverse of it, like for instance, this Uber dilemma that we're dealing with today, like issues that I personally look at when it comes to startups like Uber that have a global traction, or like Airbnb, is that the issue is that those startups take investment out of the country. You know what I mean? So in other words, it tracks the country from investments because we're constantly paying.
So maybe that's a good transition to the next part on the report. So we are covering in the report some elements around policy change and what's been going on, some of these issues that Zach has mentioned in his keynotes and that were mentioned also on the panels. So Crosby, do you want to talk to us about those policy elements, startup acts, and other things that are happening across?
Hello, everyone. My name is Crosby. I'm the group marketing for Africa Arena and Metis Group. It's a great opportunity for me to be delivering this keynote speech to you guys, so I'm excited about that. Without further ado, I'm very conscious of time. You guys might be asking, what's a Startup Act? A Startup Act is a policy or legislation that's put in place to protect startups wherever there's a Startup Act in place on the African continent. But the goal is to actually help startups, scale up and grow without any constraint, without any limitations, and at the same time allowing a lot of innovation and collaboration between, startups and founders within the ecosystem. The main crux of the Startup Act is to, in a nutshell, unlock full potential for startups to be able to attract international investments and local investments without any constraints or without any blockages. So what I mean by that is that, the government in a sense needs to put policies in place where they can allow free trade in between countries, in between regions, in between continents for startups to actually attract international investments. And also, as a challenge that's currently there now, that startups are facing is, the problem of trying to identify, especially in the South African context. There's SMEs, there's micro enterprises, and then there's startups. But to a regular person, they might think it's all one and the same thing because they're all, small ventures or small businesses. But the government need to jump in and, put a demarcation and actually say, put a differentiator between SMEs, startups, and micro enterprises so that the startups can actually be protected, which is the aim of the Startup Act. So on a South African context, I think the government has been really supportive about it. And, with the president, with the recent interview that, Christophe was part of, the president was very forefront with it, and they managed to get the government or the political buy-in for the government to be at the forefront to promote startups and to create, a space where, let's say, startups or people who create startups from disadvantaged communities to get access for their voices to be heard. What I mean by that is, having collaboration between founders and startups. And by doing that, we cut out the red tape of having a communication line where it's top to bottom, where only the big startups or the founders' voice is actually heard. But we're trying to create a scenario or ecosystem where startups, so it's a bottom-up line of communication, where startups actually have an opportunity to say what they want to say, air their views, and make sure that they are known and they're out there and that their ideas are valid. Just not because they're a smaller startup, it doesn't necessarily mean that their idea or their ideas are not valid. So we're trying to create a lot of engagement between founders and startups to exchange ideas and partner, to create opportunities for each other, to create international opportunities for international investors, corporate and VCs to invest in these startups. You can look at places like Tunisia, where the Startup Act is also, it's actually where the Startup Act was actually initiated. And I had a chat with one of the champions that side who had the Tunisian Startup Act. And what they say, they've got a different opinion when it based to if the government should be involved or if startups need the government's help. So what their theory is that we need the government's okay, but they don't necessarily need the government's help to actually operate. What they actually need is a space where they can actually operate business freely without constraint and take out issues of tax tariffs, which is another point. A small startup really doesn't really need to be bombarded, every year with filing taxes and being actually taxed, but at least until they get to a stage where they're actually earning or making a decent amount of money, only then can they look at being taxed. So if you can take away that, or if you can cut out that red tape, I think you'll be, or the government will be promoting, a free and innovative ecosystem for startup to actually operate. And then another place or another ecosystem that also has a Startup Act implemented is Senegal. And we have seen quite a lot of positive outcomes from there since the Startup Act was implemented, as you can see on the screen. There's very strong government involvement in the Dakar ecosystem. Sorry about that, guys. I just want you to see this really cool image, which really gives you a picture of how this ecosystem are operating. So at the moment, there's Nigeria, which recently actually launched its Startup Act, which will help quite a lot of startups within Nigeria and Africa as a whole, to collaborate and do business together. And as I was saying, there's a really strong presence within the Dakar region in terms of the government, affording opportunities for startups to operate freely. Same applies with Tunisia. And then in South Africa, I think we're getting there. We've got the strong backing, but what we need is to cut out the red tape really and allow startups to be, number one, recognized as startups, and number two, create opportunities for corporates, VCs, and investors to actually invest within the South African startups. I think I'll end there and I'll let Christophe take over.
Thank you,
Sure,
Crosby.
thank you.
So yeah, and to finish, what you'll find in this report is, as I mentioned at the beginning, stories behind the numbers. You see those examples of embeds we have in the report. So please download it, have a look at it. You can actually spend a lot of time on it if you watch and listen to all the podcasts and videos and startup pitch and panel discussions and keynotes that we have embedded in the report to just illustrate when we cover a topic like the one Crosby just mentioned, Startup Act, what's going on, government should just stay out, cut the red tape and just enable stuff and let entrepreneurs do what they do best, which is to create jobs and scale businesses. This is also leveraging on the work we do all year long. So, at these events, we do interviews, we record podcasts, and we tell the stories of entrepreneurship in the tech sector in Africa. And you are all part of that. And I hope that, the new founders that we have with us will be, amplified on this channel in the coming month. So to conclude, on Nathaniel's section, the highlights is it's on fire, $4.3 billion if you compare to the previous year, which was between 1.4 and 1.6 billion, but it was a down year. Year before was actually just above $2 billion. African tech ecosystem is growing, and it's growing fast. In a context of a global VC market that has been growing as well. The sad thing about the reality of what we have is that Africa still represents much less than 1% of global VC investment in tech globally. 1% for a population of 1.3 billion people, and definitely where we need jobs for young population, the fastest growing part of the population on the continent, and we'll need to create hundreds of millions of jobs in the decades to come to keep these generations busy. That can happen partly thanks to tech. We need much more money, and you that are entrepreneurs in the early stage know how hard it is to raise capital on the continent in early stage. So the good news is that there's more money, yet as Nathaniel mentioned, the money is very much on the big deals, the Series A upwards. We need more of Zach. And you could see on that ranking, the work that Startup Bootcamp, 500 Startups, Launch Africa Ventures, Keppel Ventures are doing is fundamental to unlocking the opportunity and developing that bottom of the pyramid. So we have more unicorns. Yes, we now have a bunch of unicorns in Africa, but they're all in Nigeria almost. We're yet to deliver one in South Africa or in Southern Africa. But for that, we need more capital, and we need entrepreneurs like yourselves that are eager to use that capital. Projecting ourselves forward, one of the things we do at Africa Arena is to try to give sort of a guidance of where we're seeing the market going. We had actually pretty much predicted the numbers for the last couple of years within a sort of 10-15% margin of error. And so, we provide guidance for the coming year. So we think that in 2022, for the first time, we will reach between $5.5 and $6.5 billion, which is massive. and certainly above the projections that we had made last year for 2022. And that's on the back of a number of factors. First of all, some deals that were delayed during the pandemics that are now happening. We've seen that at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Secondly, new funds like Launch Africa and others that on the back of their success are able to raise more capital and deploy more capital very fast. And the second thing is you have much more VC looking at Africa now. New Africa-focused funds that are being created. I mean, a couple of South African and American ladies have launched a fund a few weeks ago, which is a $200 million target size fund, female-led. That's just an example. The number of funds being created on the continent has been accelerated. So that's new capital that is committed. That means new capital that will be deployed that has a mechanical effect on the numbers for the coming years. We're very excited about that. The other thing that we're seeing is you see more and more M&A activities, some exits, which is really great, not enough, but we're starting to see some good exits, and some success stories. A bit of a bubble in fintech in Nigeria, so let's see what's going to happen there. But I don't think it's going to burst anytime soon. And it's great that we have those successes of Flutterwave and alike. So for the years to come, we see that in 2024, we're going to see a further growth. Our upper guidance is that it could reach up to $8.5 billion, and we should reach $10 billion potentially in 2023, and that's really interesting. So the market is growing faster than we anticipated it was going to grow, and I think it's exciting for all of us. And so for those startups that will be pitching now in a few minutes, the investors are actually going to increasingly be looking for deal flow. And I think that it's exciting for you because from a position where you were really struggling to find interested investors, you might see what we have seen in Europe and in the US for some time, which is founders really choose their investors. And investors pitching to founders is actually more important than the reverse. So I don't think it's going to happen in the early stage soon, but I think you're going to start seeing more activity, and that's what's really exciting about it. And so with that said, have a look at the report, download it, and let us know what you think. Very important for us to have your feedback. We'd like to take a few questions if there are any, maybe 2 or 3, and then we'll move on to the pitch. Just asking the team if we're ready with the pitch for the first startups. Any questions on this short presentation and the State of Tech in Africa report? Yes, at the back there. Thank you, Andileka.
Hi, I'm Charles from Surfcraft. I'm curious to understand, is the proportion of money across the different stage businesses going up in the same proportion as the total number? So, there's been this huge increase over the last few years. Do we see the same increase in pre-seed, seed, pre-series A, series A, or is it concentrated on the top end?
Good question. So I'll take that, and you're welcome to complement Nathaniel if you'd like. Well, interestingly, we've seen a different pattern in the last 3 years. If you look at 2019, it was the year where the big deals exploded. 2019, $22.1 billion. And you actually saw that 90% of that money was concentrated on about 70 deals involving 55 companies. So it was highly concentrated, but suddenly we started doing big deals. That was very important because that was a message to the entire VC community that Africa, it was getting serious. You're starting to see a lot of American money pouring in some M&A deals. And that was quite important that we're seeing, okay, there's really a big jump in valuation on some of these startups, and that was partly true of fintech in West Africa. In 2020, we had a big drop, mostly impacting the big deals. You actually had a slowdown on the big deals, very large drop of activity in the big deals, and at the same time, you're starting to see a huge increase in an early stage deal. That's when, companies like funds like Launch Africa started operating. You're starting seeing funds like Keppel Ventures being more active, 500 startups, YC Combinator, accelerating on the African. And actually, can you see the connection? So 500 startups, YC, for example, really stepping up their efforts on Africa because they could now think from the year before, okay, there's now serious money going on there. Let's take more YC, let's take more African startups into our YC cohorts, Nigerian dominating that. And so 2020 was actually a year where early stage really boomed, when the late stage actually kind of collapsed for a moment. But it collapsed because of pandemic's effect that has an impact on deals that were delayed. Now we saw those deals happening in 2021, which is why in 2021 you see again big deals rising significantly and still making the chunk of that $4.3 billion. But there's a steady growth on the early stage, which is very encouraging. I mean, we need more of that and so on, but there's really a very encouraging sign there. So our prediction is that we're going to see accelerated growth on the early stage on the back of the entire pie of money available growing. And I really hope that maybe in November, when Zach is here with us again at the Grand Summit, he announces a $100 million fund or $200 million fund, because that's really what we need. General partners of that caliber with that risk appetite that are doing real VC. Because we have a market that was private equity minded, particularly in Southern Africa, for too long time. Accountants making deals. VC is not accounting. VC is betting on the jockey, like Clive told us in the keynote yesterday. Any other questions? Maybe we'll take one more questions before we go to the pitches while the startups are getting ready. Any more questions? No? Going? Gone. Okay. Thank you, guys. I would like to congratulate Nathaniel and Crosby. The first time on stage like this. I think you could see they're a bit nervous. Well done, guys. That's the value of rehearsal is,
Yes.
to prepare. So, and also they were a co-author of this report, so well done to them. We also have Ndile Kazansi, who is a co-author of the report, and two other members of the team, Emma and Bintu. So well done to the contributors. Well done to the support of The Big Deal. I encourage you to subscribe to their fantastic channel and have a look at the report and tell us what you think. Thank you very much, and over now to the stars of the show, who are the entrepreneurs.